myself 2 years ago, pro club. I consider this a bit more like a tabletop deadlift. Very flat back. I'm using quite a lot of back to complete this movement. Notice how long, elongated my spine is on this. Oh, it froze up. There it goes. I wish I had another view of this 2015 one from the side. But this is quite a bit more weight, and you can kind of see the difference in the technique here. Yeah, I think so. So, it's Tasha's audio. So, you can see a little bit different. Oops. What if I could do them both without volume here?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So we'll watch these kind of in the same time here. I got multiple reps on the right here.
What are we looking for on the left?
Look at the difference in terms of the stroke here. So very elongated on the right. The left one, I have a bit more upright posture, and it's a shorter movement, essentially. I'm kind of shortening, I mean not physically shortening the spine, but kind of sitting a bit more back, upright, to where it is more of pulling.
Hips underneath?
Yeah, hips underneath, basically. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Thank you. The right one, I have my butt back. I'm very elongated. I have to really overcome a certain point to where I can then engage my hips. The first, or the one on the left there, the 2015 one, I'm engaging the hips basically as I go down because I have a better position here that it is a pull through, basically, the whole way. So they're very similar-ish looking. That's about 2 years of difference for myself in training. A very common mistake I see a lot, even among other trainers, is very much like the one on the right there. So very more tabletop deadlifts. So tabletop being hips are almost the same level as the shoulders. So basically have no choice but to use the back until you can really be hip dominant. So a way to prevent that is keeping upright and basically setting up from the top down. Another difference you see on here, look how much time I spend at the bottom on the right here before I even pull. So a lot more just kind of setting up, thinking about it here. It's a lot harder for me to get that deep belly breathing set into a neutral spine as opposed to the left there. It's just grab and go. Rip and rip there. So we're setting up from the top here. We're getting that neutral spine. My arms are out here so I could actually feel the lats get engaged. We don't have a bar necessarily like a squat, so I think with the arms extended, you could actually kind of rotate and feel your lats a little bit better than just right here. That also, as Sean, you were kind of asking, when you're down here and engage the lats, it kind of throws you into that extension. So arms up here, we can focus a bit more on keeping that neutral spine. And then when you go down to grab the bar, your hands are basically in the position that they need to be for you to grip and then pull the hips in. So we want to think very much hip dominance here. Pre-tension at the top. So we get tense here, tense in the lats, and then as you go down, you should be thinking, rip the floor apart, and you're going to really load those hips. So they're almost spring-loaded, that when you grab, you're just ready to launch, basically. So again, this is one technique. The beauty of all these lifts is somebody else might do this a little bit different or have a different mindset, and it works just fine. You know, they might keep proper positioning, maybe even a little bit different than mine, and you know, they could pull good weight healthily. Low back is, you know, fine. So this is a conventional pull. Difference between this and a sumo pull. Sumo, basically, the hands are going to be on the inside, as opposed to conventional where they're just on the outside. One thing, word of caution on that is with a conventional pull, If you're going wide here, you have to get lower to get to the bar as opposed to here, just because your arm length doesn't really change. Another thing too is you're stressing that underhand grip. If you are doing mixed grip, you're stressing that bicep tendon more. So we want to get the joints basically as centrated as possible. So standing right underneath the hips, toes maybe slightly turned out, and then arms basically right underneath the shoulder. So we're not stressing the joints out here. I wouldn't necessarily load a snatch grip deadlift super heavy because of that, because you do get a lot of, or let me rephrase that, a snatch grip and a mixed grip. I wouldn't load that very heavy at all just because of the risk of the bicep tendon there, or elbow. Any questions so far on the deads? Okay. Let me think. So, yeah, a couple errors I see in this is hyperextension in the low back. People think that they have to counteract getting pulled forward with the weight, so they will be hyperextended as they go to grab the bar. What this leads into is a bit more of that tabletop. You're going to see the hips probably shoot up first, and then it's all back right here until that last little bit where you might be able to pull the hips in a bit more dominant. Let's see, can we actually set this up and go through? Yeah. Awesome.
Just use a plate.
Yeah, we'll use these bumper plates here. We'll get one of these bars. Nice.
All right. I'll put it down nice and soft. No draws.
So a couple training considerations with deadlift. When you're doing more maximal loading, in powerlifting you have to control the weight down to the ground. You often see, and I want to pick on CrossFitters a little bit, drop the bar every time. You're kind of missing that eccentric motion. Not that we're necessarily trying to load that eccentric and go nice and slow. Some gyms you kind of have to, just because either the setup, they might not have bumpers, so it's kind of a situation where you might not be able to deadlift as heavy as you can just because of the environment. So do recommend going down with it, but when you get very heavy on it, you don't necessarily want to be super gentle at that very bottom range of motion of a heavy deadlift, basically because your low back is at risk, and you're going to be in a different position. So I'll do a deadlift here. Set up, pop up, then as you go back down, this is not the same position that I pulled from. So if you guys want to maybe get where I can turn this sideways, how about that? This might be a little easier. So your position that you pull from, so feet under the hips, lats engaged, neutral spine, load the hips. I usually do an underhand first here, and then that is about where my pull is going to start. I'm going to actually throw my head up more in a competition because I feel like it shortens the stroke. Head position, generally try to train with it into a neutral position, thinking of packing the chin, a little bit safer for most people.
Sexy double chin.
Yes, just get fat here. We're going to push and make double chin and then also expand the belly. So,
Looking good.
Yeah, right? Your lifting face. Anyway, that's going to be the safest way to train, I feel like, for most individuals. But in competition, it's more about getting that weight up. So if you find that leading up with the head helps you lead the chest, maybe for those 3 lifts, maybe consider doing that. But in training, when trying to keep neutral spine, maybe eyes out on the horizon. But my main point on this was basically, in training, resetting in between each pull, just because every time that you land or finish a pull, if I was to go again, is that too loud or is that okay? Okay. I'm going to be in a different position here. So I'm going to basically kind of find my position as I go. So when you get into heavy weights, boom, set up, set it back down, stand up again, boom, set up again. So you kind of practice again for powerlifting aspects. It's first rep sport. You get more of that practice from the the top down, or that same setup. So it's a bit more specific to your goal. The touch and go, I'm not a huge fan of that, mainly because of the reasoning that I just stated. So that's kind of where you're bouncing the reps off the ground. Maybe not physically bouncing them off, but kind of using that benefit of the bumper plates. To me, it feels like, again, you're going to be in a different position and you're kind of catching the load midway up, which can really throw your back at risk, and that's the last thing we want to do. The best way to get stronger is to not get injured, so you can continue to train. So that's probably the number one thing, is to really avoid any kind of training injuries. So the longer that you can go without an injury, the more that you can stick with training. So let me think. Any questions on these here common errors?
Just got up to that.
What's that?
Just got up to that.
Okay.
I got a question. So
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I got you right there. You reset. Let's say you're doing a set of 5. You reset every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I will.
You ever find, like, I feel like sometimes with clients, like if you say they're getting dizzy, despite proper breathing, do you ever have that experience, or
Yeah.
any of your clients?
Yeah. The reason why I'm not 100% sure. I think it has to do with more their general fitness, their GPP, general physical preparedness, basically their ability to tense up and do a workload or a full set at that type of tension. So I would suggest maybe that they do a little bit more cardio in between the strength sessions, so that they're more physically able to go through that.
Would you say is that something that goes away with more training? Like for you, if you're doing, let's say, a heavy set of 5, do you personally feel dizzy resetting, or is it
a little bit? Not so much resetting. I actually feels like that gives me a break. So bracing during a squat, or actually anything, bench press, deadlift, essentially the goal with it, which I tell my clients, is you want to stabilize, increase that intra-abdominal pressure so you can stabilize the spine whenever it's moving. So if you are having them do a whole lot of breathing, breathe in here, hold that breath, go through the deadlift, bam, they might exhale here, maybe breathe in again and reset. If they're doing a constant set and they're just kind of going through it, they might forget to breathe, and that's just so much time that they're basically building up all this pressure, and I think that causes the dizziness as well. So resetting each time actually gives them a break. So deadlift up, bam, reset, deadlift again, reset. It actually gives them a little bit of a chance to kind of come back down, get some air in, and do the reset. So I find that to be a little bit better, as opposed to just kind of doing all 5 maybe in 1 breath or 2 breaths, and a little bit safer that way too, because you don't really want to let out a ton of air. I mean, maybe a little bit, kind of like when you hear like people doing kettlebell swings, that where they're still pressurizing, letting out a little bit of pressure, or a little bit of air and still keeping tight. Maybe a little bit of that with deadlifts, but you don't want them to expend a whole lot of air while they're still have a load in their hands, or finishing even worse. When that bar is still moving, like that grandma. So yeah, she was. I mean, that's funny, but she could probably seriously get hurt for that, just because she's just spending so much air down in the hole, basically, actually in the warm-up room until she runs out to the bar. But, yeah, I think that helps, though, resetting in between each and just getting them more physically fit. Cardio improves their ability to recover between sets, workouts, and so on.
Is there also another cue where you're listening for the click between the bar and the weight when you're instructing somebody to do it, instead of just directly pulling it up, waiting for that click?
Gotcha.
So the connection with the weights that mess up.
Yeah, so taking the slack out of the bar, that is a very common cue for that. I like to think of it as kind of preloading from the top here. So what you'll find, if they do not do a proper job of loading all this tension, it will look like they'll grab and then just and it will be very jerky movement when they start pulling. So you want to cue them to get tight from here, get those lats engaged, drop it in, brace, big breath, and then load the hips. And when you grip, you're going to pull up. So you can hear that click. A deadlift bar actually has a little bit of flex in it, so a competition bar, where you could probably actually pull maybe a good half an inch before that bar actually takes off the floor, which is awesome. But yeah, you should hear kind of that click or that pre-tensing basically before it lifts off. Otherwise, they're going to be jerking and weakest link will probably go, which in that case is probably the low back, just because of the poor position of here. Oh, hips shoot up and you shoot into your low back, and they just either won't break it off the floor, or it's going to be a very ugly deadlift, which is lifted with the back and not the hips.
If you got fully competition tight against 135, I bet that'd be off the floor a couple inches too. Just
Oh,
from
yeah.
loading it up.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're doing a proper job, setting up from here, well, maybe not for everybody, but a stronger individual setting up, basically, yeah, like I didn't even try to engage my hips there. It's just I'm pulling up on that weight that it should kind of pop up a little bit. So you should apply basically maximal tension on that weight. Yeah, so you can actually lift it and break it off the floor in a competition or on a max attempt. That wasn't a question, was it?
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else? Over anything? We're kind of rounding out to finishing here.
We talked about sumo a little bit, stance.
Yeah, sumo. So I do have a very useful cue on this.
Oh no.
Which one are you going to say?
It's a little bit inappropriate, so we'll go with the professional cue first, and then we'll go through the other one here. So sumo stance. It's going to be different for everybody. If you have awesome mobility, you might be out here toes to the plates. The benefit is it's going to be shorter to lock out. So it might even work better for somebody with different anatomical levers, where this is the best way that they can keep their spine in that neutral position. And it's going to be a shorter lockout for them usually. So I usually go